Hello, Ted Morrissey here, doing a little video about author biographies, otherwise known as contributors' notes. They're the little biographical statements that writers will put on their websites, maybe with their social media accounts, but also when they do have work published, it's the statement they'll give to the journal or the publisher to include, usually in the back of the book with the contributors' notes, although there may be different ways of doing that. But anyway, it's a little statement about the author, and authors write them themselves, and then they give them to um, journals and so forth. Oftentimes, when you submit a story or a poem or an essay or whatever it might be, they ask you to provide them with a short third person biographical statement. So you write about yourself in third person, so that if they do choose your story to publish or poem to publish or whatever it might be, they've already got the little biographical statement there. They don't have to contact you later to try to get that or whatever. All right. And so, what I think is important in that is for it to be factual and for it to be understated. And what I mean, kind of in the opposite way, conversely, is we don't want to be singing our own praises. We don't want to be talking about what a great writer we are, about how we're changing the literary landscape, how our prose is just scintillating, etc. Hopefully, eventually, if we keep at it and keep writing and publishing, people will review our work. Uh, People will blurb us for book covers and things like that. We will, in fact, win awards, and judges will say things about our writing that we can then quote, in our websites or at our websites or in our Amazon author page or something. So eventually, if someone says that your writing is fantastic and it's page turning and it's insightful and it's forging new literary ground, that's great. If others are saying it and we can attribute it to them, that's fine. We just don't want to say it about ourselves. Okay, just literally, well, not quite literally, but nearly so at random, I picked up the Bennington Review. I get a lot of literary journals, and this came in pretty recently. And so it was literally sitting on my footstool over there where I do all my reading. So I just grabbed it, and let's just take a look. Let's take a look at some of these contributors' notes. Now, some of them are longer than others, but I think we'll get kind of a sense of them. Maybe we haven't paid a lot of attention to authorial biographies, contributors' notes, whatever you want to call them. And so maybe we don't really have a feel for what they're like, but they're pretty consistently factual, fact-based, uh, pretty brief, generally speaking. And so let's just, I don't know, I'll just read a few of them. Again, this is, what is this? Summer 2023 Bennington Review. Very well respected literary journal. So I may not get some of the pronunciations of the names correct, and I apologize to the authors ahead of time. But here's one. Samuel Amadon is the author of Often, Common, Some, and Free. Often, Common, Some, and Free is all one title. Okay, it's kind of a strange one. Let me try that again. Samuel Amadon is the author of Often, Common, Some, and Free, and Listener. He directs the MFA program at the University of South Carolina, where he edits the journal Oversound with Liz Countryman. Okay. Renee Ament is the author of Mechanical Bull, an editor's choice pick forthcoming from the Cleveland State University Poetry Center in 2023. Her work has appeared in Colorado Review, Diagram, The Literary Review, Poetry Northwest, and West Branch. She lives in Maine. Bruce Beasley is the author of 9 collections of poems, most recently Theophobia and All Soul Parts Returned, both from BOA editions, and Prayer Shreds from Horizon Books in 2023. All right. couple more. John Blair has published 6 books, most recently Playful Song Called Beautiful, University of Iowa Press, 2016, as well as poems and stories in the Antioch Review, the Colorado Review, New Letters, Poetry, and the Sewanee Review. Rebecca Boyle is from China, Maine. She graduated from the Iowa Writers Workshop with an MFA in poetry and now lives in northern Minnesota, where she teaches writing. Emily Park Brown is a poet from Alabama. Along with Zoe Tuck, they edit Hot Pink Magazine at hotpinkmag.com. Here's another. Edith Lydia Clare is a poet, translator, and MFA candidate at the Mishner Center for Writers in Austin, Texas. Her poems appear in Colorado Review, Fugue, and Quarterly Literary Review, Singapore. Here's a little bit different one. Joanne Diaz is the author of 2 poetry collections, The Lessons and My Favorite Tyrants. She is the recipient of fellowships from the Illinois Arts Council and the National Endowment for the Arts, and she is the co-host of the Poetry for All podcast. So that's kind of it. I think you kind of get the idea. Fact-based. If they have won an award or were a finalist for an award, that certainly can be mentioned. But again, that's a fact, right? That's not just their opinion. Again, brief, to the point, factual, no self-aggrandizing, words and self-praise, and so forth. It just, comes off badly. Even if it's written in third person, the assumption is that the writer wrote it themselves. So even though it may be appearing on a website or on a book jacket or something, it's what the writer had to say about themselves. Again, hopefully, eventually, and maybe it's already true, you've gotten book reviews, you've gotten judges' statements about awards that you've won, and so on. And so those can be included. I wouldn't include praise from your creative writing teachers, for example, right? It's maybe very tempting. Maybe you've had a creative writing instructor who is pretty well known, and they've said what a great writer you are. And so it's really tempting to say that such and such great writer said that you too are a great writer, even though you haven't published much or published anything yet. But I would avoid that. Again, official reviews, judges' statements about awards that you've won, that kind of thing. Not sort of personal, references or whatever, right? Now, when you get a book published, if you want to go back to your old instructor and say, hey, I've got a book coming out, would you mind blurbing it? They probably will. But then you can say they're the author of such and such, not they were my creative writing teacher when I was in college or something, right? And I understand the impulse. I think that we feel like, well, if we can, when we submit a story or a poem or a book manuscript or something, if we can put in our little biographical statement that we've, done X, Y, and Z, that will make us, more attractive as someone to publish, and so on. But experienced editors, publishers, contest judges, and the like, they can see right through that. They can see if it's not that it's a lie necessarily, but it's sort of padding, kind of a flimsy, kind of accolade. Oh, see, even my dog agrees about that. So just kind of stick to the facts. And I don't think it really does help, quite frankly. If your story or your poem or your essay is going to be published, or if an agent or a publisher is interested in your book manuscript, it's because of the quality of the writing. It's not because of your background, your biographical statement, the other publications you've garnered, what others have said about your work, and so forth. They just want to focus on the material. Yeah, sometimes your background can be useful. If you're writing a police procedural and you're a retired homicide detective, that you may want to include as you approach someone about your work. But generally speaking, just kind of stick to the facts, right? I also mentioned in some of the written notes I gave you that there is no shame whatsoever in being an unpublished author. All published authors were once unpublished. And in fact, it can be to your benefit because just about every editor I know, every editor and publisher takes great pride in discovering you, in being the first one to publish your work, to publish your first short story, to publish your first poem, publish your first novel, whatever it may be, and they will call attention to that fact. So I didn't run across any here, but oftentimes in contributors' notes, they'll call attention to the fact that this is this person's first published short story or their first published poem or whatever it may be, because they're taking great pride in that, being the first to recognize this person's talent and to share them with the world for the first time. So it's actually kind of a plus to be unpublished. Once you're published, even if you got one publishing credit, now you're published. And so the shine is off the apple, so to speak. So now no one will latch on to you, strictly, not strictly because, but as a kind of added bonus that you're unpublished. Now you have a credit or two or three. And so you're in there, you're in the corral with the rest of us, and we're all kind of elbowing each other for space or whatever, right? So don't shy away. If you're unpublished, don't shy away from that. You don't have to, use neon pointers to say that, but if you don't list any publishing credits when you approach a magazine or a publisher or an agent, the assumption is going to be that you haven't published anything yet. Okay, little notes about your interests, where you live, if you're married, if you have a partner, if you raise llamas for fun or whatever. That's cool. You can put little things in there, a sentence or two about other interests besides your writing interests. That humanizes you a little bit, and who knows? Maybe you'll be contacting an editor who also raises pet llamas, so you'll have a little bit of simpatico there. So those things are okay. Just avoid the grandiose self-praising kinds of sentences in your contributor's note, your author biography, and so forth. All right, I'm going to stop there, and I'll see you down the digital trail.